Hey everyone, it's Dan, and today I'm joined by a special co-host, Frankie Miller. He's a physician assistant who works with me here at South Coast Clinical Trials. He's a clinician by nature, and he's taking Don's place today because Don is in Ohio. He's on a family vacation out there, or a family reunion. So we're lucky to have Frankie here. Frankie's going to share some of his clinical insights with you guys and see how the conversation develops with our special guest today, Manly Finch. Manly has lots of experience in this industry. He's going to tell it to you in his own words, but basically what he's doing now is he's got his own company. It's called C3. It's a boutique CRO and a PI network. And he's going to tell you more about exactly what that is. But just to let you guys know, I ran into Manly through LinkedIn. And as a LinkedIn shareholder, I must disclose that I recommend everyone out there sign up for LinkedIn. And we got a Manly getting a call.
I was, but I turned it off.
Okay. No, I was gonna say, as a LinkedIn shareholder, it is my duty to recommend everyone out there to sign up for LinkedIn. And if you're already on it, you need to use it more. And Manly, we were talking a little bit about LinkedIn yesterday. Can you kind of share some of the benefits of using LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely, and I highly recommend it as well. I must disclose I am not a shareholder in LinkedIn, but maybe I should have been.
Yes.
I think it's a wonderful way to network with colleagues as well as friends. From a business perspective, I have had the fortune over the years to have made many contacts in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. And it's a wonderful way to keep touch with everybody. I mean, let's face it, you can't call everyone you know every single day. However, it's very easy to log into LinkedIn and shoot somebody a quick message, check what they're doing, see what they've been posting, who they're connected with. And I have found over the course of the last couple of years of using LinkedIn that it's not only a wonderful networking tool, it's a great informatics tool. Some of the groups are very beneficial. It's very easy to stay up to speed on some of the technologies that are emerging in our industry. Oftentimes, some of the group leaders and members will post very interesting comments as well as articles, some reviewed, some more of the brief type paper, but very interesting. I think it's been a great tool, not only me personally, but also for our new business.
Yeah, it is such a fantastic tool. LinkedIn. Frankie is on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, that's me going a little bit off topic for LinkedIn there. But Manly, let's talk about you. You have a lot of experience in clinical trials. Share a little bit about how you got started. Maybe from the beginning days of your entrance into this industry.
Oh, wow. Okay, so reaching way back, sure. Well, I have to caveat first and foremost by saying I'm one of the few people who are actually doing what they dreamed of doing as a child. When I was a kid, my uncle was a clinical pharmacologist. I had lost my biological father during the Vietnam era, and he sort of stood in as a role model. And you know how it is when you're a kid, you always tag around behind your male role model, and I did. And I learned a lot about what he does. And by the time I was 9, I had made up my mind I was going to be in clinical research and pharmaceutical research in one shape or another. And at 9 years old, you don't really realize what it really entails or how much schooling is required. So he started feeding me literature papers, and I guess being a precocious, obnoxious kid, I determined to buckle down and read those. And I probably understood a third of what I read, but I felt it very fortunate. And by the time I was 12 and knew how much school it was going to take, I decided that was what I wanted to do. And I guess God, good Lord willing, I made it. So I'm fortunate. I am doing what I dreamed I was doing as a child. And I will say to everybody viewing, if you have a dream, stick with it. It defines who we are and ultimately shapes where we're going to go in our lives. Like many in the industry, right out of graduate school, I was looking for a way to break into clinical research. I was actually headed to medical school. My wife and I had a bit of an accident, who's now almost 16. She's absolutely gorgeous, precocious, gifted, and that took me a little off track. So I started out instead as a CRA for PPD. Way back in the day, I think my employee number was somewhere around 320.
Nice.
So that might tell you how long ago that was.
Now, what? Just so we get an idea, what around what year was this?
This would have been in 95.
Okay.
So, good number of years back. I found that I took to it like a duck to water. I really enjoyed it. It was, it was pharmaceutical research. It took a meticulous, detail-oriented person. You had to be a little thick-skinned to deal with the travel and what have you. But I think for any of those out there who want to be a CRA, the best piece of advice I could give you is number one, you need to know your stuff when it comes to the clinical components. You will never be a better expert than the clinicians you're dealing with. So learning tact and sensitivity is a critical component of being a successful CRA, being able to lead through influence versus carrying what I call the CRA baseball bat. That just doesn't work too well.
Very interesting. Yeah, and I know. I mean, I'm not a clinician, so it doesn't bother me. And now I don't really deal with the CRAs as much, but I used to, and yeah, I know what you're talking about. Some of them do have a certain attitude about them. But Frankie, let's get your input as a clinician. How do you feel when a monitor kind of gives you a hard time about an issue, which you know you're right, but you can't really argue because she's the monitor? How do you feel about that?
Well, on the surface, or I try not to let it bother me too much, particularly while he or she is there. Once they're gone, it may bother me quite a bit, but not while they're there, because as Manley just said, the clinical work, or that it's usually fairly carefully thought out, and the average clinician is forever putting forth their best effort, and many of the issues that those CRAs might raise are explainable, and I think you probably already know what sort of things I'm talking about. And,
Absolutely.
And say once you explain it, he or she may, just that decelerate. I mean that contentiousness might, it may be neutralized or what have you. Most of the time it is neutralized. Yeah. Once you explain what your reasoning and thinking was, you can usually neutralize the issue.
Absolutely, Frankie. I think the key components is, every member of the clinical research staff, we're all team members. The investigator, the sub-investigator, the clinical research associates or study monitors, the medical monitors, the clinical study leads, the clinical program managers, the therapeutic heads. We all have to partner together to produce the highest quality in clinical research, because let's face it, we're dealing with human lives here. And I think the most critical thing we all have to remember every single moment of the day is the patient comes first, period.
Right.
If that's not our mindset, then we need to go sell stocks or cars or build houses.
That's right.
So, absolutely. And I think the role of the CRA is most important in maintaining protocol compliance and compliance with all state, federal, and international regulations. And that compliance, oftentimes, some is common sense, some is not. But as the CRA, I think your greatest role is to make sure that, one, the patient is protected, their rights and well-being and rights to privacy are maintained, protocols being followed, and the data is being collected appropriately. Outside of that, I think there's times when the micro details could be sweated a little too hard, and that's where that contentiousness comes in. And again, good CRA knows how to work with a site, get the job done, and leave the center with that site saying, wow, we can't wait till John Q. Smith, CRA, comes back and visits us again.
Yeah, no, that's
well put. Well put.
fantastic advice for those of you out there that want to be CRAs. We've had a few videos on that topic. We've even interviewed some CRAs, and we've got one in particular we're going to interview. He was a CRA in India, and now he moved to San Diego for a large company out here. Everyone knows who that company is. And so we're going to interview him soon as well and get some insights from him directly. So I'm glad this topic kind of was able to cover the CRA issue a little bit. Now back to yourself, Manley. So after the PPD CRA, what happened there? How much time did you spend there, and then what happened after?
About 3 years at PPD. It's very strenuous, very hard work. At that time, all the CRAs worked their all the CROs worked their CRAs pretty hard. I enjoyed it. Good training program, good company to work with. Have no regrets whatsoever. I then went to a company called Kindle and worked with them for a number of years. Great company. Transitioned from the role of lead into clinical project management. From Kindle, I went to Bristol Myers. I did contracting work with AstraZeneca through a company that's now been absorbed by another company, and that was MedX. Really enjoyed that. And then I moved to New York and stayed at a company called Applied Microbiological Industries, and had a long-running tenure there as both the head of clinical and medical affairs. From there, I was very fortunate, moved to a company called Teva Neuroscience, headed up their clinical operations for North America for 3 years. Really enjoyed the company, but my wife is from the South. She wanted to move south. Now, I'm a Pennsylvanian, and hey, by the way, go Eagles, go Phils. Sorry, I had to put that one in.
Sixers?
Well, I'm not a hockey fan too much. You know the old adage, there was a fight and then the hockey game broke out? Yeah, no offense.
The 76ers, the NBA. Are you a fan of the NBA, the 76ers?
I'm sorry, I thought you said the Flyers.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. No. Oh, yeah, the Sixers, absolutely.
Very good. So now you're in South Carolina.
Absolutely.
And now let's back up to Teva Neuroscience. You have some type of background in neuroscience, is that right?
That's correct. I have a master's in neuroscience. I've been fortunate. I have a master's in clinical research and completed a master's in public health at Drexel.
Okay, very good. So you do have a lot of clinical knowledge as well.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate in that realm. I guess I'm not one to sit around and watch a lot of TV at night. I have to keep my mind going, and I thought maintaining, schooling at night just keeps your mind a little sharper and focused.
Mm-hmm. Now, C3, that's your company. You founded it. You want to tell us what C3 stands for?
Absolutely. C3 is Comprehensive Clinical Consultants. We're a boutique CRO who specializes and targets specifically early maturity phase pharma and biotech, as well as nutraceutical companies. Our focus is providing the highest in client-oriented services at the most cost-effective price. Nothing derogatory to my very large CRO competitors, but for a small company, a startup company that may be operating on venture capital or has just gone through their first Class B capital raise, it can be daunting to work with a company that's 50 times your size or even 100 times your size. You want someone who's going to partner with you and collaborate with you, who's as interested in your success as you and your stakeholders and investors. Mm-hmm. We often can sit down with their groups, guide them to an appropriate clinical development program, assist them in developing that and writing that program guide, and then developing appropriate clinical operations plans to execute against that at a much more cost-effective rate than the larger companies can provide at this point. In addition to which, we provide contract clinical consulting services, both to our CRO, Big Pharma, and site partners. And by that specifically, we work with a lot of new investigative centers who want to branch out into research, have some trepidation in doing so, although they have great clinicians and wonderful clinical staff, great docs, great PAs and nurse practitioners, and probably have an experienced coordinator or two. But they're not comfortable with taking on the role of 10 or 12 trials at a time because they don't have the infrastructure or the experience. We sit down with them and teach them the very basics, from what are the key performance indicators to track from a metric standpoint. How do you track them? What is it that sponsors or CROs are looking for? How do you do good quality data collection? What are the basics of GCPs, ICH, Code of Federal Regulations? For granted work, what is 45 CFR 46, the common rule? How do you maintain that compliance and ensure that during an audit, be it from a sponsor, CRO, or from the FDA or another regulatory body, that you survive that, not only survive, pass with flying colors? How do you build marketing material? How do you go out and get new trials? How do you recruit patients? How do you design a comprehensive patient recruitment program? What are the components of a good recruitment program? Can a coordinator manage 4 or 5 trials and do patient recruitment and study marketing at the same time? Because of that consulting expertise, we have branched out and created an investigator network as well. And I think our investigator network paradigm is very user-friendly. It's more of a consortium and provides sponsors and CROs with a large block of great investigative centers who have wonderful processes that we've helped them put into place, who, if we have multi-site awards from a CRO or sponsor, we design, craft, tailor, and implement comprehensive patient recruitment programs specifically designed for that trial and then specifically tailored to each center's geographical and demographical needs.
Mm-hmm.
So we have quite a few offerings.
Now let's back up here to the sponsors that you work with. So in a nutshell, you have sponsors. They may be small, or what I'm hearing is they're usually small, but they're sometimes the large pharma, right?
We have bid for large pharma. I think we're still probably in their radar screen, kind of small, but that's okay. We're really focusing on those early maturity phase companies that need someone our size to collaborate with them.
So you're working with the smaller, either biotechs or you mentioned nutraceutical. Can you explain what that is? What's a nutraceutical?
Absolutely, absolutely. A nutraceutical is any health product which is designed to basically influence your health. Now, there is something called the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, or DSHEA, which states that a nutraceutical, a supplement, a vitamin, or a nutritional product cannot treat, mitigate, cure a disease. And you have to make that disclaimer when you market your product. However, DSHEA does allow you to make certain claims, provided that they are backed up by rigorous scientific clinical research. And typically it should be 2 projects published in peer-reviewed literature. And by that I mean something along the lines of the Annals of Internal Medicine or the Journal of Sports Nutrition and Medicine, and those sorts of journals.
I think I understand. So like that company that makes the pomegranate juice, just as an example, if they want to make certain medical claims, they have to do clinical trials and they have to publish certain articles in peer-reviewed journals, right?
That is correct. I think one of the most classic and well-known examples, and I won't name the manufacturer, I didn't work with them, but there is a cereal brand out there right now that states that if you eat their product, you can lower your cholesterol. And
Special K, right?
beg your pardon?
Special K?
Well, let's don't name names. I don't want to.
Okay. Okay.
However, they're very well known. It is a oat product.
Uh-huh.
And they say you can lower your cholesterol. And they had to go out and do clinical research that showed, and it was randomized, double-blinded clinical research on their breakfast product. And they were actually able to see a reduction in cholesterol by eating this product.
Excellent.
That's the type of research that we work with. If you want to go out and say, oh, for instance, if you take my product, the length of time you suffer from the common cold will be reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to make that claim, you have to go out and do the clinical research, and it can't just be, marketing research. And you know what I mean by marketing research, some consumers in a mall answering a questionnaire. You have to have a rigorously designed protocol. Typically, it must be placebo or sham controlled. It needs to be randomized. It needs to be double-blinded, if possible. And it should be run with enough recruited participants that the results would be clinically meaningful and statistically significant.
Fantastic. Excellent information. Now, how relatively recent is this law?
DSHEA is 1996, so it's been out there for a while.
So, prior to 1996, companies like Kellogg's or whoever else that wanted to make claims about their products did not have to do clinical trials, and then ever since then they have had to do clinical trials, and they may not know how to do clinical trials. Is that kind of where you fit in there?
That's absolutely correct. And in actuality, the DSHEA was somewhat of a victory for the vitamin supplement and healthcare products. Prior to that, they were not allowed to make any claims whatsoever. DSHEA actually allowed that if you could prove pretty much that your product claim was correct, you could make it. Now, again, you cannot say that you're treating, curing, or mitigating a disease. It's more along the lines of more of a structure function. For instance, I think one of the more classic things is people know that if you have low iron in your blood, that you often suffer from fatigue, one of the symptoms of anemia. And if you take an iron supplement, then you have more energy, so you can make a claim like that. If you can specifically prove, however, you're actually mitigating, then it's a little bit different process. Now, recently a company out there took niacin, which I'm sure you're all aware of, niacin,
Mm-hmm.
and ran it through an IND process. In other words, they registered it as an investigational new drug. They conducted the trials that would be required to get them through the phase 2 and phase 3A process, and successfully submitted an NDA. And that product is currently marketed, and if you go out and search niacin, you will run across that website, absolutely. And those are some of the things that we're in discussions with other companies as well. Can you take your healthcare vitamin or supplement? Are the clinical results meaningful enough and the results statistically significant enough that it would make an impact to an FDA review board? And in certain cases, that actually turns out to be true. The caveat is, of course, that's an expensive path to go down. And by doing the DSHEA compliant trials, you also have to be in compliance with the Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Communications Commission. So both the FTC and the FCC, you must be in compliance with any marketing claim that you make. In other words, if you say something, it needs to be true, or the FTC or the FCC may come after you. Now, there has been a number of very recent incidences where some dietary supplements that were imported from overseas made some very strong health claims. They were reported to the FDA, and it was found that unfortunately these herbal products had been doped with actual API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, and they were recalled. If you go onto the FDA website, you'll see numerous instances where this has unfortunately occurred. And it's our company's job to help a nutraceutical company separate themselves, wheat from the chaff, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to show that number one, they believe that their consumers' health is the most important thing that they're about. Secondly, that the products that they manufacture meet all governmental requirements for good manufacturing practice, where necessary, good laboratory practice, and then during clinical research, good clinical practice. Everything that we conduct is GCP, ICH, and CFR compliant. And where we are simply going for DSHEA, FTC, and FCC compliant claims, we're making sure that all trials are conducted in compliance with 45 CFR 46, or the common rule compliance. In other words, we're doing everything in our possibility to make sure that patients are safe, the claims are warranted, and we have actually protected the company from spurious tort lawsuits.
Mm-hmm. Now, when these nutraceuticals do clinical trials, do they recruit healthy volunteers? How does that work?
Well, it depends. At first, if it's a new vitamin product, it has to be tested. It has to be GMP certified, of course. You would want to do some basic phase 1 and early phase 2 style to make sure that it's safe for human consumption, and there is a requirement for that.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're out of that arena and you want to look at a disease population or some participants who are afflicted with one disease or another, then you're enrolling participants who, like phase 3 and late phase 2, actually have the condition under study. And, there are studies out there right now for nutraceuticals, for diabetic products, for hypertension, for general weight loss, for bone replacement. I think everybody's familiar with chondroitin, and for knee and bone and joint health. There are calcium supplements out there that claim to be able to help osteoporosis and provide additional calcium back and reduce bone loss. And again, those products have to prove in very stringent, scientific, rigorous clinical trials that what they're saying actually occurs.
Mm-hmm.
It's safe for human consumption, and it does exactly what they say it does.
So you mentioned GMP. For those that don't know, and maybe I'm one of them, is that good manufacturing practice?
Yes, that's correct. GMP is good manufacturing practice.
So every pill that you see over the counter in a 7-Eleven, all those pills that give you energy or things like that, those have to pass GMP guidelines.
They are most certainly supposed to, and that's 21 CFR 111.
Okay.
And unfortunately, and this is something, and I'm not going to bash anybody, but I would say when you flip the thing over and it says a product of USA, you usually can be certain that it's met the highest standards. If it's manufactured overseas, I think you would be, number one, I would recommend before you take any nutraceutical or vitamin that claims to have a health benefit that you consult your clinician, like Frankie. Go talk to your physician assistant, your MD, your DO, your nurse practitioner first. Some can have a harmful effect if they're not taken as directed or as intended. Additionally, one of the things that you should always beware is caveat emptor, buyer beware. Now, before you spend a lot of money on a nutraceutical or a vitamin or a healthcare product or promotion, go online, do the research. There's a lot available out there. I advise every healthcare consumer, do your homework first. And then if it checks out and the research is there, and often the research will be published on the website where you can actually access it, and it looks good, your healthcare provider agrees this is something beneficial for you, then by all means, move forward. I'm a big proponent at my age of taking CoQ10 and B12 so that I maintain good men's health. Take a multivitamin every day. I try to eat right, lots of fiber, but this caffeine habit's probably not the best for me.
Yeah.
But again, to answer your question, yes, there are manufacturing standards that vitamins and supplements must meet. And if not, and the FDA is aware of it, or they are making claims they cannot substantiate, or they're making drug claims, they will be dealt with by the federal government.
Well, I just learned something new about nutraceuticals. So back to C3, your company. Um, what kind of services do you provide for the sites? I know you talked about the analytics, but let's say you have a site out there that pretty much knows what they're doing already. They have their own system. They just need another study or two here and there
Sure.
during the slow periods. What do you guys provide for them?
Absolutely. Well, one of the first things we do with all sites, be they novice or advanced and well experienced, is we sit down with them and find out what are their core areas of expertise. Number one, what do they have the greatest amount of experience in? Second and third, what are their next and third levels that they have experience with, and what would they like to do? What are some things they haven't done but are qualified to do? One of the things about the federal regulations, it says you must be qualified by education, training, and experience to conduct the clinical trials. So we first find out what is it that the clinicians, investigators and sub-investigators and coordinators have experience in doing. We also find out, how have they been performing? Unfortunately, and this is something that we all have to acknowledge, CROs and sponsors follow metrics from trials. And we may have done perfectly well in the first 10 trials we ever did, but this last trial, well, we contracted for 15 patients, and unfortunately, we only gave 6. Mm-hmm. And that might be something that we have to overcome with a certain sponsor or CRO. And that's something to know about. You're only as good as your last trial, unfortunately, with that individual CRO or sponsor. We'll sit down and we'll talk about marketing materials. What materials do you have available? What's your web presence? Are you using social media out there to onboard trials and recruit patients? Mm-hmm. And then from there, we'll talk about what is available out there in the industry for trials that are currently onboarding new sites. I've been very fortunate and blessed over the years to have developed a robust number of contacts in both CRO and sponsors. And once I have this information gathered together, first I'll look at my database to see what trials I'm aware of that are currently recruiting centers. If they meet those requirements, or I believe truly that they can do it, even if their experience is not as robust as they might like, we'll get the feasibility questionnaires completed, pull in the metrics, make sure that it's very polished, and get it submitted to the appropriate gatekeepers and stakeholders that sponsor the CRO. Let's say if there's nothing out there currently that I'm aware of, then I'll reach out to my network contacts and let them know that I have a new investigator or a number of investigators who are looking for these types of trials. I will personally reach out via phone, via email, and through my social marketing contacts. One of the things that we do for new centers immediately is we will register them on all the clinical trial websites, which means that whereas you may not have thought of it, we can put you on at least 20 different websites through both sponsors and with listing services to make sure that we get you a battery of feasibility questionnaires coming in. Now, my services are pretty straightforward. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm sure Dan, you'll make my contact information available.
Yeah,
my premise is if I can't get you a trial, then it's not going to be of any cost to your center. That's the bottom line.
Now here's what, Frankie, go ahead.
Manley,
Yes, sir.
I've heard you mention a couple of times that we sit down with. Does that, am I to understand that you actually go to the site and collect this information, meet the investigators and the site people in person, or is that a as-needed thing?
It is on an as-needed basis, Frankie. What we try to do is exactly what we're doing now. Use Skype conferencing where we can sit down and talk, do a little face-to-face just like this. I'll ask for a number of documents and send some questionnaires and forms to fill out and get back and look through. And then we'll have a very detailed, structured conversation. Now, when we're dealing with centers who have a more robust need, where there clearly is an opportunity to come in and help them improve their performance, build infrastructure, then our consulting services offers that to come on board and sit down with you and literally handcraft these things specifically tailored to your center. In situations like that, myself or one of my colleagues would come out, visit with your center for a couple of days, and make sure that we're understanding clearly what your needs are and making sure that we're communicating back to you what we believe your next steps would be. Additionally, we can custom craft specific for your center development programs for your research.
Long term and short term, right?
Yes, sir, that is absolutely correct. I just recently worked with an investigator in the Midlands of South Carolina to help this gentleman blow out his research. One of the things that we're doing for him is developing a very robust clinical research expansion program. It contains 6-month, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals with an operations plan to execute against, timelines, and a budget. We are doing a fair amount of the work for this gentleman, but there is homework for he and his team as well to complete.
Sure.
And by doing this, this gentleman has a desire to create a premier research center in South Carolina in the Midlands. So we're going to help ensure that he is successful in obtaining that goal. He's a very, very community-oriented clinician and has a great desire to be able to provide the clinical trials to the community as access to health care for patients who might otherwise not have access. And of course, him being profitable is important as well, and we're going to ensure and help him do that.
I was fairly recently at something on the order of about 3 IMs, or investigator meetings, and about over a span of maybe 10 days, and then I was at NCDU.
Sure.
New Clinical Drug Evaluations Unit meeting. And repeatedly in those 3 IMs and at NCDU, I kept meeting investigators who were hungry for trials. Now, if I'm understanding Manly right, you guys invested a lot of time with these new sites that might be interested in your service. Am I right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And when I say a lot of time,
to be successful.
I'm sorry?
We want them to be successful.
Okay. And if they're successful, that means Manly success.
Well, C3 is successful. Absolutely.
How many people could you? Well, first, how many people could you deploy to work with a given number of sites? Meaning, how many people are on your staff? And it sounds like you guys go the whole route for people for these investigators.
We can. We can be as hands-off as just simply an investigator trial locating service, all the way to coming in and doing actual clinical research center management for a new investigator. I have within my organization 5 field-based people who work with me on a contract basis.
Okay.
All of them have at least 10 years of experience in the industry as field monitors and CRAs. 3 of them are auditors as well as CRAs. And they work with me to ensure that we're actually training the centers. I mean, we provide, it's entirely up to the practice manager or clinician owners as to how in-depth the program they actually want. As Dan was saying, for somebody who is very experienced, you have tracking metrics, you have a budget and contract, you have a QA QC program, you've probably got a marketing manager for your trials, you've got a number of well-trained study coordinators, and all you really are looking for is to have someone help you come in and maybe fine-tune a few things and find you a few trials. We can do that. As I was alluding to with one of the clinicians in South Carolina, we're actually going in and helping him structure his whole program, from writing SOPs, training his coordinators, establishing the research paradigm, and working with the local CROs and sponsors, monitors, to have them come in at open houses and meet the clinician, meet the coordinators, and see the improvements in the processes. So it can be as little as the site needs to as in-depth as they require. And
That's
like,
neat. That's neat.
well, I think it's important, Frankie. There's the most important person we all know is the patient.
Sure.
And without the participant, we will have no new drugs, bottom line. But the second most important component in all the research is the clinician investigator. One of the literature papers I read a couple of years back said very clearly that only 28% of sites were profitable, truly profitable, which means that 72% are breaking even or losing money. And I think that's something that clinicians intuitively have a fear of. Is, okay, I'm going to get into clinical research. I want to do clinical research. But am I going to maintain profitability, or can I at least break even and offer my community members access to medical care for those who may be without healthcare access or socioeconomically challenged? And it's a difficult decision for them to broach, and we try to help make that decision for them and guide them into those trials. One of the things also I think that's clearly a concern in the United States is clinicians are not trained to be researchers. You go to medical school, DO school, PA school, you do your nurse practitioner, your doctorate. Very few, and I mean only a handful of clinical training programs actually rotate you through clinical research, and usually if they do, it's an elective. Pretty fair statement, Frankie?
That's right. That's right.
So a lot of this is on the job. How does a clinician get the experience? It's to get the trial, you've got to have experience. Well, I've got to get a trial to get experience. And that's the catch that they get caught in, and we help them overcome. I guess we would be called an exothermic reaction. We're the energy of activation to get things moving for them.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's a benefit. One of the things that we lecture on, I am often and fortunate to be so, an invited speaker at seminars, and I've chaired a few on site activation, study startup, patient recruitment, is where is this new group of clinician researchers going to come from? A lot of the, I would say, the old war horse been out there doing research for 25, 30 years, well, they're starting to retire. And it's not like there's a mentored residency program in clinical research, and there just simply isn't. So I hope that C3, one of the things that we can do is to the community of research that we can help offer that service, to train the new investigators, get them those first few trials, mentor them through there. We can even come out and do auditing with our CRAs prior to the CRO or the monitor CRA getting there, and make sure that their first monitoring visits, their first audits, they pass with flying colors. And as you know, you keep the CRAs happy, you keep the QA, QC directors at the sponsor and CRO happy, you will get more trials.
And these are certainly valuable services you provide, and we're going to get back to it in a little bit, especially for the business development people out there watching, because there are a lot. We get questions all the time. How do I get new studies, things like that. You're
Sure.
going to give some advice, but I can't get off this nutraceutical thing. I went to clinicaltrials.gov while you guys were talking, and I just put the first thing that came to my mind, green tea. Right?
Okay, yeah.
And I got tons of studies. I got asthma, I got healthy volunteers, cancer, chronic hepatitis C, another one for healthy volunteers, type 2 diabetes, and that's just on page 1, and there's like 40 pages or more just on green tea. So as a study participant, because we created this blog for them primarily. We interviewed someone who did do a clinical trial on those makeup wipes. The wipes that women wipe their face with.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting when we interviewed her, because they're testing the side effects. And for these nutritional supplements and even green tea and coffee, I never realized that there's so many trials out there for these type of research participants to perhaps get involved with.
Absolutely.
So clinicaltrials.gov is still a great place to kind of check out almost anything. If you can think of a supplement, check out clinicaltrials.gov and see if they have studies going on for you. So that was just fascinating to me. And I also put coffee because I'm a big coffee drinker. And
Yeah,
there
me
was
too.
lots
Me
of
too.
trials for coffee. So imagine getting paid to drink coffee, right?
Sounds
Well,
good.
yeah, I mean, maybe we should reach out to Starbucks and say, hey guys, for that excessive daytime sleepiness indication, is Starbucks better than Pete's?
Right, right. Yeah, and then we can join as participants and get paid.
Absolutely right. Well, now, if we're actually helping lead the research, unfortunately, we couldn't be research participants, but
That's where the big bucks are, Manly.
yeah, that's true. Well, and you're absolutely right, and I'd like to put in a plug. Thank you, Department of Health and Human Services, for putting out clinicaltrials.gov. I mean, I think that was a great requirement to have out there. Now they're even required to post results online. I know some of the pharmas were not exactly happy with that, but I think that's beautiful for the participants and the consumer at large in the United States to know that that information is available to you.
And just so that they know, where's the results page for the study results?
Typically, once you go to www.clinicaltrials.gov, you will find the search link. You find whatever trial you're looking for. There is a regular search and an advanced search. Once you locate the trial you're looking for, if the trial is complete, it will say complete in green, and it will either say results unavailable or results available.
Okay.
You could actually, if you wanted to, in the advanced search function, you can go in and type in only for trials with results available, and then when you hit search, it'll return only those. But you're absolutely right. There's a ton out there. The National Institutes of Health has a division called Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And oftentimes, CAM, Complementary and Alternative Medicine, National Institute of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, will fund a number of studies for certain nutraceuticals, specifically if there's a number on the market who have been making claims and the National Institutes of Health wants to ensure that those claims are as stated. Also, just for those who are thinking about developing a nutraceutical, you can get SBI or small business loans through a number of organizations to get started. And you could write a grant to the National Institutes of Health on your product and see if you get funded. No guarantee. Unfortunately, our current administration seems to be determined to raid the NIH, and I pray that ends very soon. If we don't fund the NIH, then all we will have is sponsored research, and that would be an unfortunate situation.
Right.
There are a number of really good organizations out there who are currently also sponsoring clinical trials. You'll find them, some of the fruit producers. Florida Orange, and I can't remember, Association of Florida Orange Growers, I think, sponsors some on occasion. There is a Doctor of Naturopathy school, and I believe it's in Oregon, and it's called the Bastille. Very well recognized naturopathy school. They do quite a bit of complementary and alternative medicine research. And you'll find that mainstream allopathic institutions of medicine will conduct similar trials for benefit. I mean, let's face it, we would not have known the benefit of many nutraceuticals if someone had not been out there sponsoring these. Niacin, it's a classic example. Fish oil, another one, very important. DHEA for cognitive health is another one that without the funding, the National Institutes of Health, I don't think people would be aware of or have those benefits. Very important. So we definitely support that component. We also support those who are out there working on orphan drugs, Cinderella drugs as well. There's so many, let's face it, niche diseases that are understudied and underfunded. And I would say if I have a soapbox to get on, and I actually do, if you know me, you know that I can get on a soapbox pretty quickly. We need to take care of those patients who don't have the large lobbying class that's out there. The Suman Komen Foundation has been wonderful for working with breast cancer. However, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which only affects about 50,000 children in the United States, doesn't have quite the lobbying that they do, and I think that's something that we need to remember. So we should all support further funding from the National Institutes of Health, to be sure. Sorry, that was my soapbox.
It's okay. It's all right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I feel like it needed to be said.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, we just interviewed a guy from the Tuberous Sclerosis Alliance.
Sure.
Very rare disease. That will be uploaded shortly. Back to what the research sites can take from this interview, because we kind of tried to focus on the study participants a bit. Back to the research sites. We get a lot of questions from business development people in charge of getting new studies for their clinics, and we get some questions.
Sure.
Or I guess funny responses to my answers to them. Usually, my answer is always to go to clinicaltrials.gov and see what studies are currently recruiting or not yet recruiting, and find a way to call those study people, and then I get the answer back that, well, it's just too much work. So, how does Manly get studies?
Well, I'll say, and let me address that one first. I mean, that's, God, to no offense to any viewer or attendee, if you want work, you got to work for it. That's the bottom line. And I hate to hear that going to ct.gov is too much work. Now, I will say this.
Yeah, it's a true story. I got that exact quote from someone. It said, well, I appreciate that, Dan, but that's too much work. Can you just send me leads? And yeah, it's real, honest truth.
Well, okay. Well, in fairness, oftentimes, and I think we know this, let's face it, if you're a busy research center, you're a coordinator, you could have 5, 6, 7 trials.
Mm-hmm.
National average went up from 5 to 6 to 6 to 7 very recently. Now, I think that's too much for a coordinator. I think you overload them, you burn them out, you don't get good data quality, you don't get good patient care, and you start getting a lot of queries and deviations. And again, the patient comes first, and that means a coordinator who has the ample time. Now, unfortunately, this is something I lecture on. I think I want to make this clear. If you have a coordinator doing 6 or 7 trials, is it reasonable to ask him or her to do patient recruitment, to do new clinical trials onboarding, to manage regulatory submissions, budgets and contracts, and then on top of that, this person actually is expected to have a life? And that could be worrisome. That's why turnover is high. And let's face it, coordinators are not paid what a clinician is paid. And a lot is asked of them. So in response to that, one caveat I will say about clinicaltrials.gov. Sponsors and CROs, they are not required to list an email or an exact name for a study sponsor contact. It can be an 800 number.
Yes.
And frankly, I despise that. I think that abrogates putting someone on the hot seat to be responsible. To say, okay, yes, my name is John Q. Smith, MD. I am the therapeutic area head, and I will take your phone call. Look, if you're getting paid the kind of money we get paid in Big Pharma, then by God, I think you need to step up to the plate and own up to it. There's 2 sponsors in particular where when you look at where the investigator centers, it just says blank blank's investigative center in Tucson, Arizona. Yeah. Blank blank's investigator center in Cherry Grove, North Carolina. I think that's crappy. How is the patient supposed to find the trial if the whole intent of ct.gov is transparency?
Now, do they do that? Because I know who you're talking about. I won't name names because I work in this industry. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for years. I've been using that as my primary tool, and I just hate when I see a study of theirs. I don't even click on it anymore because I know that it's just gonna say.
Because you're not going to get any information.
Now, why do they do that? Do they want to keep people like me away from calling, or are they trying to hide from the patients? What's going on?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. No, I think there's a number of reasons, and I'll hit, I think, what I think are the top three. One, um, years ago, and I don't mean that many years ago, competitive business intelligence was a marketable commodity. There was corporate espionage. No ifs, no ands, no buts. If you knew what somebody was working on and you could get a similar product on the market at the same time or quicker than that particular sponsoring organization, you know as well as I do, first to market wins largest market share. End of story. If you can come in at the same time or shortly after them, you can take away a good amount of the market share. So I think there's that residual paranoia corporately still living.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, for good clinical research sites who are specialists in certain areas, there is competition for their expertise. And I know a number of clinicians who, because of their research prowess, their number of publications, and their academic standing in the field, turn down studies. Now, that's not John Q. Smith, MD, in Coldwater Springs, Idaho. It just isn't. However, if they're well known, they're pretty well sought after. A lot of sponsors don't want the other sponsors knowing where they're doing the research. Again, it goes back to point number one. I'll tell you something. Every CRA out there who's traveling knows what I'm about to say. You go to a clinical research center, no matter how hard or how industrious the center is to maintain the privacy of one sponsor to another, you're in there monitoring, and sitting on the wall are study sponsor ABC, clinical trial XYZ's case books sitting right there. Bottom line, it happens all the time. Do you want to further promote that out in the industry by saying, okay, yeah, I'm researching a new indication in multiple sclerosis, and I'm using this particular site in Anaheim, one in San Bernardino, and etc.? Or do you want to keep that shielded so when the next CRO or the next sponsor is out there looking for research centers who do this specific disease indication? I can tell you, I have had my clinical project managers go on ct.gov and say, all right, I want you to go and find as many names as you can for this one particular disease indication because we don't have a cohort of those in our study database at this point. That's the second reason. The third reason, I think there is still some concern about results reporting. I have, over the course of the last few years of presenting at some of these seminars on clinical trial conduct and protocol authorship, I have heard remarked that there is concern that by releasing study data results as required now, since I believe 2006, on clinicaltrials.gov, it was effective 2009, excuse me, written in 2006, effective 2009, that you may be giving competitive edge to a sponsor who is working on a similar product. So I think there's a variety of reasons, those three being the top. Again, the whole purpose of ct.gov is transparency. First and foremost, to the community of U.S. citizens, period, to whom the Department of Health and Human Services reports to. We're their bosses. We're the healthcare product consumer. They work for us. We pay the taxes. So I think there should be further revisions of the ct.gov requirements. I think it needs to list who the investigator is and what their contact information is. Now, I'll tell you, from a patient recruitment standpoint, if I have a movement disorder, Parkinsonianism of some sort, or I have multiple sclerosis, or I've got a neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, I want to find a clinical trial for a new drug because my current drug isn't working for me. If I'm a sponsor, I want everybody out there knowing where my drug study centers are so they can reach out to those centers by going to ct.gov and finding something local to the area. a good patient recruitment program sponsored by and paid for and conducted centrally by a sponsor or a CRO can cost as much as $8-9 million, depending on how large a clinical development program is. But certainly, 3 to 5% of the total study budget is not unheard of. CD.gov is free clinical trial marketing. Bottom line, sponsors, wake up, put the names out there. You get more trial patients.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry,
Right.
another soapbox I'll have to watch.
Frankie, what do you think about all this?
I don't know. I am, and I would bet that a lot of people watching this are learning a lot today. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, this is something I wish I had when I started working in this industry. So hopefully people find it of use out there. Now back to C3. So, you have these relationships with these small biotechs or nutraceutical companies. So if a research clinic wants to get a hold of you for getting more studies, how do they get a hold of you? Would it be on LinkedIn or just, email you, phone number?
Absolutely. They can reach me on LinkedIn under Manley, Manley, Finch, Finch. My account is set up so that anyone can contact me. My cell phone number is 845-705-7046. Again, that's 845-705-7046. You can reach me at mfinch, MFINCH 001 at gmail.com. And I'd be delighted to speak with anybody. Now, I will state for everybody out there, my web designer is still working on the web. We're supposed to have had that up last week. God willing, and the creek doesn't rise, it will be up and functional next week, in which case you'll be able to just Google us, pull us up, and go right to the web center and see our services offered. I'd be delighted to chat with anybody, even if it's just a chat, shop talk for a little bit to see if we have some congruency. That's fine. If someone would like a more detailed prospectus of our services, we'd be delighted to provide that to them, both to sponsors, CROs, as well as any nutraceutical companies out there. We're delighted to work with them. But most specifically, I think the most important thing here is we all, first and foremost, and I know I've said this a couple times, make sure we're taking care of the patient first. Let's make sure we're all trained, educated, and have good experience so that we can do the very best in clinical research possible. And by doing so, we will all have a great career and will remain profitable and will really be servicing our healthcare community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Manley. And don't worry, by the time this video is actually up and live on our site, your site will be up. We'll probably put this up in about 2 to 3 weeks, so you have some time.
Sure.
Your website will be up.
That's good.
I'm going to give you a chance to answer probably your biggest question that you're going to get from anyone, and would probably keep a lot of people from calling you, so let's just get it out there so you have a chance to answer them. Because I know it's a question I had. Why would I, as a site, want to pay someone to find studies for me and that money's coming out of my pocket? We're doing all the work. This guy's just getting us a study or a lead. How do you respond to that? Because you did a very good job responding to me yesterday. So I'm going to give you the chance to respond to everyone watching, because I know that's going to be the biggest issue.
Well, for an investigative center, absolutely. I mean, if you're a successful center and you've had no problems onboarding trials and your audits have been clean and pristine, you've got a good key performance indicator tracking system, and your SOPs are solid, your coordinators are trained, your clinician investigators are happy, there's probably very little that I could actually do for you other than maybe provide some fine-tuning, and I would say everybody needs a little fine-tuning.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just breaking in, or you've got research going, you've got most of the components going, but you're still struggling with finding some trials, it might not be just the fact that you're having some problems finding trials. There may be some operational issues. There may be some what we call brand pollution out there from maybe not performing 100% in previous trials that we can help you fix and clean up. Additionally, our services for Investigator Network is we charge a very modest annual fee. For that, we provide a comprehensive review of all your systems and what you're missing. We try to provide replacements for, and that includes Excel tracking sheets, marketing materials, registering you on the appropriate websites, etc. And then our paradigm is such that we negotiate the contract and budget directly with the CRO or sponsor. Now, some may have trepidation with that, and I understand. We will have worked with you up front to complete a very exhaustive bid grid or an Excel spreadsheet that covers all the components that you normally perform, such as a full physical, a brief physical, a MADRS, a ZOM, a HAM-D, a Chem 14 panel, IVRS, data entry, coordinator time, PI time. Once we're all in agreement that that's what you know you need to be profitable, we then go and negotiate with the CRO and the sponsor, and we negotiate an overhead of approximately 10%, depending. It may be a little higher if you need more assistance. If we're actually doing submissions, regulatory packages for you, it's a little bit higher. It never comes out of your pocket. It's not like at the end of the trial you've got to pay me 10 or 15% or a whole patient stipend, or you're paying me half a stipend up front. So by the way we're doing it, you're still getting exactly what you need. We provide a very valuable service in helping you become as efficient, cost-effective, and productive as you possibly can be. And then for the additional services, I'm and my staff, we're out there kicking it, trying to get you more trials. One of the great things that we offer by being part of a PI network or consortium of investigators, I can approach a CRO or a sponsor and say, hey, one of the core pieces that we all know you need to shorten is site onboarding, site qualification visits, and then site activation. I can bring to you 10, 20, or 30 investigators with this specialty who have this number of years of experience, have enrolled this number of clinical patients. Additionally, we're going to craft a comprehensive patient recruitment program for our consortium of investigators and tweak it and fine-tune it for each individual center, and then present that to them, and that makes it a lot easier. If a sponsor knows that they can gain 10, 15, 30 centers at one time, which completes their complement of required trial sites, they have just shortened the time they need to locate and onboard clinical trials. The published literature is pretty clear on this, and I have presented this often at seminars. It costs clinical operations department between $100,000 and $200,000 per day, and that's just lights on, fax copiers, and cheeks in the seat to run clinical trials. If it took them 30 days to find a complement of 20 qualified investigators, let's just say it was $100,000 a day. That's $3 million I just saved them. That's a real serious return on their investment. Additionally, by working directly with the centers, gathering the information we're going to gather, and that includes previous audit reports, any 483s that you might have, we're going to work with your centers to make sure that we help you put your best foot forward. If there's any issues, we're going to help you resolve them up front. When I go to them and we work together, if we're doing the reg submission for you, I'm going to reach in to my file folder. I'm going to pull out a regulatory package that is complete. The only thing that will need to be done is the 1572 executed. If it's an 812 device trial, then the responsibility investigators. If it's a BLA trial, similar. If it's a nutraceutical trial, you'll just need to execute the responsibility of the investigators trial and the copy of the protocol page. And then we submit in one shot that center. There's no going back and forth chasing down the clinician at the hospital to get this license and that license. We're going to have worked that out ahead of time. So again, I can shorten the time to IRB approval. Now, C3, Comprehensive Clinical Consultants, uses specifically New England IRB. They are an accredited IRB. They have been around for almost 20 years. They were one of the first who were registered as a accredited research IRB institution. I would invite anyone to go to their website, which is www.neirb.com. They are one of the premier central IRBs out there. By working with the sponsor to do this, we can get things turned around very rapidly. One of the things that I lecture on too is for study site activation. IRB approval times can absolutely crush a study trial startup, and we've all been there. If you've ever been at the site, you know. There are certain IRBs, and I will not point fingers or name names. I'm sure they do a wonderful job of being 21 CFR compliant. However, their processes can be slow, stultive, and somewhat obfuscating. I have found that over the years, New England provides incredible ethical oversight to a trial, first and foremost, most important. Secondly, their support systems are incredible. And thirdly, I believe for a sponsor, they will find that their rates, I think, are very competitive. By working directly with New England for our investigators network, we can turn around their site approval times exceedingly rapid. And I've worked with them for almost 15 years now, so I know that process very, very well.
Well, we've been trying to get an interview with the IRB people, so if you can make that happen,
I'd be delighted to.
Forever grateful to you, Manley.
This group is outstanding. You know, I'll say this much. One of the first things that I really liked about them was the fact that their ethical oversight was second to none. The other thing that I really enjoyed about them was their infrastructure for submission was incredible. They have an electronic submission system. You can view your documents on site or in situ on their website. It's beautiful, and their IRB coordinators are very responsive. If you have an issue, you can get to them pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you can help me out with the interview, that would be super, because we got a lot of patients that ask all the time, how am I being protected? And,
Sure.
We give them answers, but it's best to interview someone that's not myself or Don or Frankie,
absolutely.
Telling them what they think we want them to hear. Manley, we can take forever. We'll probably do another part 2 of this later on, because we did not get into a lot of things we wanted to get into. We'll definitely do a part 2.
I'd be delighted. Thank you, Dan and Frankie, for having me. It's been my sincere pleasure.
Thank you very much, Manley, and
thanks a lot, Manley. And once again, I think everybody watching learned a lot today. A
whole lot, and they're going to learn a lot more in the part 2.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you very much.
And stay on the line. This is Dan and Frankie Miller signing off from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Thanks a lot.